Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our new season of the Classical Academy podcast, your friendly guide to the world of classical Christian education. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Phillips. Hey, why should Christian students study a 3,000-year-old story full of pagan gods, war, guts, and glory? My guest today is Leigh, Upper School Humanities Teacher, Dean of our house system, and he is the proud owner in his classroom of the largest, most beautiful discussion table west of the Mississippi, maybe west of the Atlantic coast. We opened last season with Chris telling us about one of the foundational books in classical Christian education, Homer's Iliad. We received great feedback with calls for an encore about that episode. Because of that, we're launching our new season with Homer's sequel, the Odyssey. Mr. Leigh, welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you. So glad to be with you.
And excited that you're starting the new year off. It's so appropriate. Okay, let's just ask the overall question. Why? Why do we study Homer's Odyssey? And you can have 2 hours to talk about that, I'm sure.
Why study Homer's Odyssey? My question, in answer to your question, is, do you think we need to know about justice and prudence?
Indeed, we do.
Then that's why we need to study Homer's Odyssey. Homer's Odyssey is the book that teaches us how to, I think, ultimately how to pursue, discover, earn justice and prudence.
Mm-hmm. So the classical reason is the Christian reason. I think we're learning in classical Christian education that true Christian education is classical. You can't have classical education that's not Christocentric. Amen. So you've answered the question of both classical. Sure, it's a classical piece, a foundation of Western civilization, but also you're looking at these important Christian virtues to culture.
I think so. We could end the podcast there if you like, but I think it goes there. Yeah.
So what's the context? What context do we need to understand Homer's Odyssey?
Yeah. The story in the Odyssey is not one that's told linear. Actually, it's the first thing you probably need to know, especially if you're jumping into it for the first time, which everyone needs to jump into it. Mm-hmm. And if you've read it, you should revisit it because Homer's a master. He's one of the greatest masters. Read it again. But the story of the Odyssey is it's not a continuation from the Iliad. The Iliad, you may recall, is the story of Troy. Ilium, Iliad, the story of Troy. It is not the story of Achilles, although Achilles is the prime mover in that story. Mm-hmm. And we have a gap. The story ends, and in fact, the city's still standing, and there's no victory, and that might seem a little weird. You need to read more broadly in Greek mythology. You can read, even Virgil gives us some other great insights into what goes on. Yes. He gets to kind of write an after-action report from the Roman perspective as they just maraud and steal from the Greeks shamelessly. But he's good enough because he's Virgil, so that's okay. But Homer takes us into the second most important book of the classic tradition, the Odyssey, after Troy has fallen. And in fact, everything's kind of moved on. We're actually, because we don't go linearly, we're actually going far into the future, and we jump into the story in Ithaca with Odysseus' son, Telemachus, who is, or Telemachus, depending on how you want to put your stress, but he is grown up in Ithaca. He's now a young man in his, usually we estimate, early 20s, somewhere in there.
Right.
And he's obviously grown up without his father at home because his father went off to war. But the war was over, and still father has not come back. In fact, it's been how long? It's been 10 years since Troy fell, and Odysseus is still not home.
Sure.
So where is he? Is the big question. How on earth can you not be home 10 years after a war that took 10 years to do, right? This is impossible. And so the son begins our journey trying to discover who his father is. His home is in disarray. People have come to try and marry his mother, and Penelope is this brilliant woman who manages to hold off the suitors, but while they're waiting to wear her down and eventually one of them get to marry her, they're proceeding to just make a wreck of Ithaca. Mm-hmm. They're eating and enjoying all of the palace, and it's pretty gross.
Yeah, trashing the home.
Yeah, it's kind of disrespectful.
And so you've set the stage. We have the son. Who is his father? Is he alive? Mm-hmm. He's wondering that and searching around. So there's some. Obviously, this is a huge journey, an Odyssey, which has come right on into our
culture.
Isn't
it convenient that he's named that, and that's what it means?
He was named after the term for a voyage thousands of years before it came about. Yeah. So what are some of the key turning points?
So Telemachus goes off and he encounters heroes that have survived the war and made it home. Most notably, he comes to Sparta and sees red-haired Menelaus with Helen, the woman whose face launched 1,000 ships. They're home, and they're somehow at peace and happy, which is a really, truly beautiful thing. He also gets to encounter Nestor. Nestor, devotees of the Iliad will recall that Nestor never shies away from the opportunity to tell you a story in the longest possible way. But from him, he's going to start to hear some of the snippets about what happened to Agamemnon, Ajax, Telamonian Ajax, some of the other heroes, and then your father, he just kind of disappeared. He's a man of so much sorrow because Odysseus was the man who hatched the plan that broke Troy. He is the one that masterminded the Trojan horse.
Sure.
So if anyone, he also was the one that won in a competition between the Greeks. He won the honor of receiving dead Achilles' armor. So he's this awesome and amazing hero, and he's just disappeared. He's just gone. Last I heard about him, I think I heard something like his ship got shipwrecked over there, or someone saw him over fighting these monsters, and I just keep hearing only bad things, but I never hear of him actually making it home and settling like he should, because if any of us should have been able to get home, crafty, wily Odysseus should have made it home. He is, after all, the man of twists and turns, the man who can find a way where no way exists.
Yes, known for his courage, but more for his wiliness.
Exactly.
Yes. Now, were there some assumptions or some projections about what could have happened to him, and how do the Greek gods fit into this story?
Sure. The suggestions, well, certainly, obviously, I think at this point, 10 years later, you kind of have to confront the possibility that someone's died. But again, we never hear, there's no sign. Where's his ghost? If he's dead, in the Greek world, we know that ghosts come back to tell people, hey, move on. It's time
Especially
to go.
Great heroes.
Exactly, right? You earn a trip up to tell people your son, if nothing else. Or the gods would come and tell you, hey, move on. But that's not the word. The word keeps coming back, no, hold out hope. Father is coming. So there's also the hint that comes out that one of the things that has affected his long journey is that Odysseus angered a god, most specifically, unfortunately for a man who lives on an island, angered Poseidon, god of the sea.
Bad one to anger when you spend your life on the sea.
You might really want to appease Poseidon if you were a man living on an island. But Odysseus is not a man. Certainly, when he begins his journey, he is not a man of pious carefulness. He is a man of crafty daring.
Yes.
So he's definitely on the bad side of a very powerful god, and his path has been sown with sorrow for that reason.
Yes. So with all these adventures of wily Odysseus, do we ever get to know what happens to him?
Absolutely. Telemachus leaves us, or we leave him, I should say.
His son,
right? And as he goes back home to be a man and step into his role, we jump to Odysseus. And again, out of time, but because this is a grand story that we're being told, a full scope. You can't tell it linearly because it's a journey, and we need to journey with him and to understand and appreciate the fullness of it. We're going to encounter Odysseus, who will then be telling the story to people who have found him washed up on a shore and explain where he's been. Well, I came up on the shores of the Cyclops. He blinded Polyphemus in that famous episode of Guess My Name. Oh, I'm nobody. Oh, nobody did this to me. Yeah, he's a cunning one, Odysseus. But actually, that's kind of where we also see him go immediately into trouble. He's so wily and so cunning that his men don't trust him. And so when he brings a bag on board the ship and says, "Whatever you do, don't open this bag."
Oh, yeah.
His men assume that he's stealing from them or keeping the best treasures for himself.
Or some treasure, sure.
So as soon as he's asleep, they open it. Well, that bag happened to be the wind that blows him clear to the other side of the world, and thus begins. He was in sight of the harbor of home.
Just as he's there.
All the way back. Why? Because his own vices have made it so that nobody can trust him. He's a king without a community, without a group of men who believe in him. And he's going to continue to demonstrate amazing ingenuity and courage. He's going to have to face multiple sea monsters. He gets caught between Charybdis and the Scylla, which is actually where we get the idea of caught between a rock and a hard place, a monster and the impossible.
Yes.
And he's going to find a way through that. But over and over again, each one of these adventures costs a companion here, a companion there, 11 ships in a storm. Another, at one point, he'll land on an island with a witch. She'll turn all of his men into pigs, and she says, "You get to live with me." And even though he gets out of these experiences and these traps, there's something that keeps losing little bits and pieces of the wealth that he came away with. All of his men eventually will be gone and dead. He'll journey with them down into death itself. He'll come through Hades. He'll talk to all of his old dead friends. He'll see mighty Achilles and Agamemnon and sullen Ajax, who's still bitter because Odysseus beat him in a contest, won Achilles' armor, and so Ajax kills himself because he's so frustrated. All of these heroes, why does he have to go to death? It's the classic shedding of those pieces of ourself that prevent us from being able to go home. Because if Odysseus's grand adventure is the quest to go home, the question isn't just could he make it home, but the question really is, what is it to go home? How does anybody get to go home?
Yeah.
There is a reality of life that we are driven from home by necessity sometimes, but also by opportunity. The great things of life, the challenges that come our way, we would not be good people if we stayed at home and did nothing. That's not the way we were made to be. We are designed to go and work and labor and do good things. And scripturally, we see frequently, right, the glory of a young man is to do those things with his hands and to build.
Yes, and dying to self.
Absolutely.
Yes, and we see the whole reason that the frustrated reader doesn't get his way and just tell your men what's in the bag and you can go home. That would blow everything.
Well, it'd be wonderful if he could,
Yes.
But it's a virtue. Sadly, for all of us, virtue is not something that you can even simply know and then easily embody.
Yes.
Many of us know what's the right thing to do. Many of us know we can feel it when we're with our friends, and we can feel the longing for, I wish you could be what you ought to be, but why are you not? Why can I not be what I ought to be? And how can I hope ever to be that way? I think that's one of the things that we get to see in life, and that Homer also is able to demonstrate to us, is that in time and through suffering, this man of twists and turns is himself twisted and turned until he is made smooth. He is brought through to the other side, no longer holding his own bag of tricks, but rather longing. He's purified in so many ways to know what is the real desire and the real treasure.
Well, and you're kind of leading me into my the next question I was going to ask is, how does this form the students? How does studying the Odyssey form the student? I mean, you've already started touching on it, but specifically, maybe what have you seen? How are they formed through this magnificent work?
So the students, as they read the Iliad, are tempted in many ways to see the call of glory and the opportunity to just act violently and to take what you want, and that the strong are correct. Might makes right. And that's a really hard lesson to sit with. It, I think, is ultimately repudiated even within the story of the Iliad. But but it is a lesson that this world speaks to us, and I think Homer wants us to wrestle with it. When we come to the Odyssey, we get to see one of the greatest heroes of that struggle of violence and brute strength, a cunning man who never met a challenge he couldn't overcome, have to learn the hard lesson that your cunning actually meant that nobody could trust you, that your indulgences actually meant that everybody pretty much could guarantee that you would serve yourself at the cost of those around you. And so we talked all the way at the beginning. I said, I asked you, how important is justice and prudence? I would say that one of the essential changes that occurs to Odysseus as he goes through this journey is that he is coming to, through the hardest of lessons, to have a just soul. He is learning what moderation actually looks like. So a student, especially a seventh grader.
Sure.
Well, first of all, is there any group more in need of justice and prudence than seventh graders? And I say this with humility, but no, probably not. I have a seventh grader this coming year, and no, it's a hard road. But truly, we all are in need of a brilliant example. And if we can read the example of sorrow, intertwined with wonderful adventure and heartbreaking realities. At one point, Odysseus, at the very end, right before we come to him, because, again, non-linearly, we come to him at the end of a lot of his adventures, and he recounts everything to us.
Yes.
When we come to him, he's actually just gotten off of living on a paradise island with a beautiful goddess who has offered him, but also not really offered. She's kind of forcing him to accept, which is also one of those interesting things that Homer, a Greek man, would recognize the reality of what that forcing him to live like that actually is. It's evil. It's terrible. But Odysseus is actually living on an island paradise with a beautiful woman who is actually a goddess and can give him immortal life, living with him as her husband in paradise. And what does he do all day long? He sits on the edge of the island facing home and cries all day long, because it's not about living in the best island house. It's not about having the most amazing, beautiful prize, trophy, whatever, however you want to define that sort of physical success that we so easily get, that is so much the Iliad, right? That Achilles trades everything for. I want to be a name everybody remembers. Look, Achilles is unquestionably the greatest hero of the ancient world as far as the Greek heroes go. But Odysseus' story has transformed, I think, much more of our society and our culture, because Odysseus is not the story of human selfishness pleasing itself. It's the story of a man being conformed to learn what justice is, to develop prudence, and to come to love it and to see it as the essential thing that is the only thing he wants in life. He's ready to trade everything to hold on to what real home is. What I want to be a son. I want to be a father. I want to be a husband. I want to be home. I long for my home more than anything else. Still then, what is home? Like, is just getting to a place going to suffice?
Right. And through that longing, we see the shedding of these passions. We see the dying to self. We see it happening. And so you you see changes in the students, do you, about what they care about? I mean, like you said, they're seventh graders, people who are not familiar with classical Christian education. I think they have difficulty comprehending the significance of what goes on in that kind of discussion.
I think it's a mystery, even for those of us who are in the room watching it occur, because, one, I do believe that Homer is truly a great master. And his story is something that has moved and provoked geniuses for millennia after him. Plato writes a myth incorporating Odysseus into his myth of the afterlife. Tennyson reflects on the final visions of Odysseus in his old age. It goes over and over and over again. And when seventh graders are reading it, all of their impulses and all of their stir-crazy energies are put against this. You're wily. You're you're active. You want to go do these things. You want to find a way to make a way. You want to overcome these challenges. What if I told you, child, student, friends, that the short way, the clever way, the profitable way will not actually get you what you want? And I think experiencing a story that demonstrates that over time, and they get to wrestle with and to really sit with, what is the cost? The frustration of coming so close to succeeding and having it snatched from your hands. I am a full-grown adult, and I wince and am sad that Odysseus loses Achilles' armor. I want Achilles' armor.
Yes.
That would be amazing.
Yes.
Do you think by the end of the story that Odysseus cares one whit for Achilles' armor?
Wow. Yeah.
He knows that I'm a fool if I'm sitting there wishing for Achilles' armor. And I've missed the wisdom that was offered to me.
Yes.
In Republic, Book 10, the myth of Socrates is telling the story. He says, by chance, these souls are moving through, and by chance, Odysseus' soul had drawn the last lot to come and pick, because they're all about to be born again. They're going to get new lives. So he'd drawn the last lot to pick of all, and so he came to choose from memory of its former labors, meaning when Odysseus was going through his Odyssey, it had recovered from the love of honor. And that can be a hard thing to recover from, because honor, we know that honor is a good thing, but honor is a dangerous thing. Honor is such a good thing that we might mistake having honor for being worthy of it, right? We might think that winning honor has made us somehow better than others, and that is the road to pride, and that's the road to ruin.
So let's say I'm a parent, my student is studying the Odyssey. Hopefully they've heard this and they've been inspired to join in the journey. What questions should I ask? I'm a parent. What questions should I ask my student about the Odyssey?
I think one of the most important things to reflect on when reading the Odyssey is cause and consequence. To consistently go back to, okay, so break it down for me. What occurred? And then can you put your finger on the why? Why did this occur? It's not like an Aesop's fable where we're supposed to be drawing these simple lines of, not that they're profound too, right? But this sort of direct, linear explanation of what the story is about. We're supposed to be reflecting on how the choices of our hero and those around him have set certain events in motion, and then their response to those events, right? If you didn't make certain choices, you would not be in this situation. And now that you're in this situation, there's been a cost. Sometimes, eventually, again, he will be alone. You've lost everyone and everything. What could we learn from that? Why did Odysseus end up in this place before he could get home? What was the thing that put him on a path where it was necessary to be stripped of everything before he could get home?
Fabulous. Fantastic. I think you've convinced people that watching the Armando Sante, Greta Sacchi mini-series on the Odyssey is not enough.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I thought that was an assumption that we were all watching that together. I mean, yeah, no. Yeah.
Chris, fantastic. Parents who have students in Mr. Leigh's class studying this, I think you know how blessed you are and how blessed the students are to be in there getting this rich study. And yes, seventh graders are capable of going these places. And it's wonderful to be building a foundation for a prudent life at such a young age. Thank you so much for what has been a great segment. I went back over my character studies of Odyssey. Now you've forced me to read it again because it's
Excellent.
it's so rich. Thank you, all of you out there, for joining us on our first session this year, the Classical Academy podcast. It's presented by Trinity U, the service of Trinity Classical Academy here in Santa Clarita. Our producer is Shay Ramquist. Stephen Petrie is our audio engineer and provides our original music. And until next time, let's all continue to grow in prudence, wisdom, virtue, and the love of God. Thanks for being with us.